In today's video, I'm going to be building birdhouses 3 different ways, so let's go ahead and get started. I started by trimming the ends off of some cedar planks. Next, I headed over the table saw where I cut them to the final width of 5.5 inches. The reason why I cut them to 5.5 inches is because cedar fence pickets are 5.5 inches wide, and you can just use some of those. For birdhouse number 1, I started by marking the center of my board. Next, I made 45-degree angles coming to a point. I cut it out on my miter saw, and then I marked 5.5 inches down from the bottom of my 45. I had to make 2 of these, one for the front and then one for the back. I traced out a semicircle on the bottom of the board, and then I attempted to cut it out with my very dull jigsaw blade, and then my phone ended up running dead. Next, I cut 2 boards to 6.5 inches for the roof. I set my saw to 1 inch and I cut some strips out. These will be for the bottom and for the top. I went over to the miter saw and I cut them to 5.5 inches long. I added a 45-degree angle to one edge of the roof pieces, and then I sanded all the boards in a completely out of frame video. Next, I marked the center of one of the front boards and made a 1.5 inch hole. Next came assembly, where I started with the top and then I added the back and the front, and then I started doing the sides. And if I did it again, I would start on the bottom so that there was like even spacing through the whole thing. On the birdhouse number 2, I started by setting my saw to 15 degrees and making a mark at 5.5 inches up. Then I set my speed square to 15 degrees and made a mark, and I cut it. I made 2 of these, one for each side of this birdhouse. I set the bevel on my saw to 15 degrees, and then I made a mark at 5.5 inches for the front board, and then I cut it. For the back, I kept my saw at 15 degrees and I cut it, and then I marked 13 inches up and cut it straight. For the top, I set my saw to 15 degrees and cut it at 10 inches. I set my saw back to 0 degrees and cut a board at 5.5 inches for the bottom. Next, I marked the center of the front board and I made a 1.5 inch hole. Finally came assembly, where I started with the sides and the front. I put some glue on and I bride nailed everything together. On to the final birdhouse. I started by cutting 3 boards to 5.5 inches, 1 for the bottom and then 2 for the front and back. Next, I cut a board to 6 inches for the other part of the bottom. The 2 roof boards are 7 and 7.5 inches long. I marked 2 inches down from the edge of one of the 5.5 inch boards, and then I drilled it out with a 1.5 inch bit. Next came assembly. have all these birdhouses up on my Etsy shop, so if you want one without having to build one yourself, check out the link in the description. If you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe. Bye.